So today I'm going to try and film a video all on my new phone, just using my phone instead of my camera, just to see how it goes. And for this I've decided to come to a cemetery. I'm going to walk around, show you some dead famous Russian people, and see if I can find a good amount of people who I can tell you something about. I think I have a pretty good knowledge of Russian history, so let's go. Here we see the first person I found, Nikita Khrushchev, who was leader of the Soviet Union until the 1960s when he was replaced by Brezhnev. He's the only leader, or long-serving leader of the Soviet Union, not to be buried in the Kremlin walls. He was highly unpopular when he died, which is part of the reason he's here. And when he was kicked out, he was given a small pension of 500 rubles a month, a house and a dacha, and that was it. And he died in relative obscurity, and he only got a one-line obituary in the newspaper Pravda. So yeah, he lived a life of great power and died in obscurity, and here he is in the most prestigious cemetery in Moscow. So as I'm here in the cemetery, I'm surrounded by names and busts of people I don't recognize. We see lots of army generals, lots of men, a lot more men than women. And lots of them here are people who are authors, artists, but around this area, at least at the start, there's a vast majority of people who are generals. If we have a look at this guy here, this is pretty common of the general ones. It's just a bust with an uniform and all the medals. It's lots of World War II generals here. So, oh, it just started snowing. So, let me see if I can find anyone I recognize. Here we see the grave of Boris Yeltsin. Yeltsin was the first president of Russia from 1991, from 1999 to 1999, and he was removed when he stepped down, and Vladimir Putin became president. And here we see his grave is in the form of a Russian flag. He's best known nowadays in Russia quite negatively for being a drunk, for his negative, for lots of inflation, oil prices problems, and also the crime and corruption that was rife when he was president. So overall he's looked at quite negatively in the country, but he's got quite a grand grave here as the first president of the Russian Federation. Here behind me I found the grave of Nikolai Gogol, obviously an incredibly famous writer from Ukrainian Soviet, who wrote The Nose, The Overcoat, what else? Government Inspector, which satirized corruption in the Russian Empire. He is very well read in schools in Russia, and yeah, everyone knows this guy. He's really famous. And here now I found Samuel Marshak. He's best known in Russia for writing kids' poems, kids' stories too. But for Westerners, you might be more interested to know that he is also incredibly famous for translating lots of English works into Russian. And he really is the most popular translator of Shakespeare from English into Russian, Samuel Marshak. Okay, so right next to Gogol, I found the grave of Bulgakov. Bulgakov, most famous for Master and Margarita, a book, a masterpiece set in Moscow. He's an incredibly famous author here in Russia, but he didn't write so much compared to lots of the other super famous authors who have huge portfolios of work. And actually in between Gogol over there and Bulgakov here is another incredibly famous writer, Anton Chekhov. Chekhov is considered one of the greatest writers in history. He wrote The Cherry Orchard, Three Sisters, Uncle Vanya, one more super famous one. Yeah, and they were all plays, but he's also known as being one of the greatest short story writers of all time. He wrote one of my favorite short stories, The Lady with the Dog. or The Lady and the Lapdog, however it's translated. And actually he's number 2 in the world for movie adaptations of his works after Shakespeare. Here I found the grave of Yuri Nikulin. Nikulin is an incredibly famous actor, comedian, and probably more popularly known as a clown. An incredibly famous clown in Soviet Union known as Uncle Yura to kids. And in the center of Moscow on Tsvetnoye Boulevard, if I'm correct, outside the Moscow Circus, there's a statue of him as a clown. It's Nikulin. Here I found the statue of Peter Kropotkin, who was a communist leader and was exiled for his views way before the revolution in 1917. After the revolution, returned to Russia only to find he didn't like the communism which existed from the Bolsheviks. Yeah, he was well into his 70s, he died a few years later and never really saw the Soviet Union after dreaming of communism for basically his entire life and having to live in Switzerland, France and England to escape the prosecution. He lived in exile basically his whole life. Here I found Vernadsky, who I really don't know anything about apart from he was one of the founders of biology, geography, something like that. I know he's Ukrainian and he has a big street named after him in Moscow, Prospect Venanskого. But yeah, I know really nothing about him, but here he is, a scientist and academic, very famous. And if we keep walking, you can see, you probably just saw in the back of that shot there, we have another very famous Russian, but for something completely different. Shelyapin. So here I found the grave of Nadezhda Aliyeva, who was the second or third wife of Stalin. I can't quite remember. Anyway, she's famous for killing herself after an argument with Stalin. A public argument, something about peasants and collectivization, and they had an argument in public in front of other people, and she went into her room and shot herself. And Stalin was said to be distraught by this for many, many years, but here she is in the most prestigious cemetery outside the Kremlin in Moscow, Nadezhda Aliyeva Stalina. So here I found another grave. This time it's an astronaut, Belyayev Pavel. If I'm not mistaken, he is famous for commanding the first ever space mission where a man had a spacewalk. He wasn't the man who did a spacewalk. That guy was called something beginning with a K. I can't remember, but that guy's still alive and I imagine he'll be buried here when he dies. But yeah, it's a very nice grave for him. I don't know who this guy is, but look at this. It's got a tank. What does it say? Afanin. And here I found the grave of Mayakovsky. Mayakovsky was a Soviet poet and actor who for many years adored Lenin and wrote great poems and supporting communism, supporting the regime. And he died when he was about 30, committed suicide over a woman. So it's why he's always pictured so young, because he committed suicide. He was known for, I think he was married, but he was having lots of affairs, and there were 2 or 3 women who was seeing, and he fell in love with one of them, couldn't be with them, and ended up killing himself when he was only very young. But he is known for being an incredibly gifted writer, an incredibly gifted poet, and yeah, that's Mayakovsky. Here I found the grave of Vyacheslav Molotov. Molotov was the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Russia during World War II. Churchill said he was renowned for his great diplomatic and negotiation skills, but he's most famous in the West for signing the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, as we know it in the UK. He was in government until Khrushchev took over, and then he was kicked out and he died in relative obscurity. And here we see he has quite a small and not so impressive grave compared to lots of them which surround him. So yeah, that's Vyacheslav Molotov. And actually, if you've read the George Orwell novel Animal Farm, he is the character Squealer, the pig. Here I found the grave of Sergei Bondarchuk, the actor who won an Oscar for acting and directing the 1968 version of War and Peace. What's happening with my camera? Guys, my phone is absolutely freezing. It's -4 out here. The battery is running down super quick. The battery from my gimbal just ran out, so I have to say bye. I didn't get the chance to film Prokofiev and a whole bunch of other people. I had a list of about 40 people I wanted to see, but unfortunately I won't be able to see them. And I'm gonna go home. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, maybe I'll come back and film some more, and maybe I can talk more in depth about certain people who you saw today. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please give me a like. If you want to see more videos from me, please subscribe, and I'll see you soon.